When working in Flash Professional, we have the ability to use both vector and bitmap image assets. This lesson demonstrates the differences between these two types of image files. So here I have a file opened up called vectorbitmap.fla, and we have two objects in here. This one to the left is a bitmap image that's been imported into Flash Professional. And this one over here is a vector image. You can see right away that as I select both of these, that there are definite differences between how they appear when selected. And even when not selected, the actual vector image looks quite a bit different from the bitmap image. So one of the reasons that we would want to use vector over bitmap is because vector can scale. And what I mean by that is that vector images are actually made out of mathematical data. And this data is processed and rendered to the screen to display the image to us. Whereas bitmap images are made out of a constrained grid of pixels. And this grid doesn't change. It doesn't recalculate itself. And if it does, if you do resample, what will happen is you'll actually lose information. Or things will get blurry or artifacty, and it won't look very good. If we zoom in to 800%, and we go over to the bitmap version of the Flash logo, we can see that we have some artifacting here from compression that was used on the image. But we can also see each individual little pixel that shows up on our image here. So if we were to actually blow this up and move it around in Flash, we might actually get a lot of these artifacts and pixelations pretty apparent to the user, depending on what we're doing. On the other hand, if I move over to this version of the logo, the vector version, we can see that we do have nice clean lines still. And we can select any of these portions and see that they are almost like distinct shapes. If we choose our subselection tool, and let's zoom out of here, we can see how this vector object is made up out of different paths and anchor points. Whereas the bitmap image, of course, is just itself. So what this means is that since the vector image is made out of this mathematical data, so paths and anchor points, even if I were to blow it up quite a bit, it would still be nice and crisp. However, blowing up the bitmap image, you would get the sort of pixelation that we saw when we zoomed into it. So normally a vector image is going to be easier to work with. However, in order to get a vector image to have sort of the same depth and appearance of fidelity that a bitmap image has, you would have to use a lot of data. And the more data in a vector image, the more processing power is needed to actually render it to the screen. So in that case, you have to be kind of careful when using a lot of large vector images, simply because they can be taxing on the CPU. A good example of this is that on mobile devices, it's actually recommended to use bitmaps over vectors, simply because bitmaps are not going to take that extra processing power to render. They can just be moved around the screen. So this has been a quick overview of vector versus bitmap image within Flash Professional CS6.